The laughter started the moment she stepped onto the concrete apron outside the operations building. It wasn't loud or cruel at first, just the kind of careless amusement that comes from people who think they already know the whole story. A few junior sailors leaned against a Humvee, coffee cups in hand, eyes drifting toward her left forearm as the morning sun hit the ink exposed beneath her rolled-up sleeve. Someone snorted. Someone else shook his head. One of them muttered, "That's gotta be fake," loud enough for others to hear. The tattoo wasn't flashy. No skulls, no flags waving in the wind. Just a simple, clean insignia worked into her skin with precise lines and faded edges, the kind of ink that had been there long enough to age naturally with the body carrying it. It sat there quietly, unbothered by the stares, just like she was. She adjusted the strap of her duffel bag on her shoulder and kept walking, boots hitting the ground with a steady rhythm that spoke of habit, not nerves. She had heard worse. She had heard it in different accents, different countries, different uniforms. People laughed because it was easier than admitting they didn't understand. A woman with that tattoo didn't fit neatly into their mental filing cabinets. It was simpler to assume it was a joke, a dare gone wrong, something picked off a wall in a tattoo parlor by someone trying too hard to look tough. One of the men finally said what everyone was thinking. "Didn't know Halloween came early," he said, nodding at her arm. The others chuckled. Not malicious, just careless. Like boys tossing stones into water without thinking about how deep it might be. She stopped walking. The laughter faded into awkward silence as she turned to face them. Her expression didn't harden. It didn't soften either. It stayed neutral, controlled, the way it had been trained to stay under pressure that would make most people fold. Her eyes moved over their faces slowly, calmly, memorizing without effort. "It's real," she said simply. That only made it worse. Someone laughed again, louder this time. "Yeah, and I'm the president," another replied. A few grins spread. One of them raised his phone as if considering a photo. She didn't react. No sharp words, no threats. She just shifted her duffel to the other shoulder and turned back toward the building. As she walked away, the jokes followed her like thrown pebbles, bouncing harmlessly off her back. She had learned long ago that silence could be heavier than shouting. Inside the building, the air was cooler, humming with low conversation and the distant sound of boots moving down hallways. She checked in at the desk without ceremony, signed her name, and took a seat along the wall. The room smelled faintly of coffee, metal, and the kind of tension that always lived in places where important decisions were made. Around her, operators moved with purpose, exchanging clipped words, glancing at screens, adjusting gear. A few eyes found her again. The tattoo was still visible. A raised eyebrow here, a whisper there. One man leaned toward another and murmured something she couldn't hear, but she recognized the look that followed. Skepticism mixed with amusement. She closed her eyes for a moment, not to escape, but to center herself. Memories flickered behind her eyelids. Saltwater nights. The weight of a rucksack cutting into her shoulders. The sound of breathing through a regulator in total darkness. The quiet understanding that came only when everyone around you had earned their place the hard way. She had bled for that ink. Not in a chair with buzzing needles, but in places most of these people would never see. The door at the far end of the room opened, and the atmosphere shifted instantly. Conversations died mid-sentence. Backs straightened. Cups were set down. A presence entered the room before a word was spoken. The SEAL commander walked in without hurry, his uniform immaculate, his posture relaxed but unmistakably authoritative. Years of command sat on him like a second skin. He didn't need to raise his voice or announce himself. Respect followed him automatically, pulled along by reputation and experience. He scanned the room as he walked, eyes sharp, taking everything in. People felt seen when he looked at them, evaluated in ways they couldn't quite articulate. He nodded once to the operations officer and continued forward. Then his gaze landed on her. It wasn't immediate recognition. At first, it was just another face, another figure seated against the wall. But as he drew closer, something changed. His eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, but in focus. He stopped walking. The room seemed to hold its breath. His attention dropped to her forearm. The tattoo. Up close, it told a different story than the jokes suggested. The lines weren't bold and fresh. They were softened by time, by sun, by salt. The placement wasn't for display. It was where someone put something that mattered, not something meant to impress strangers. The commander took a step closer. She opened her eyes and met his gaze. No challenge, no fear, just calm recognition, the kind that passes silently between people who have stood on the same invisible ground. For a long moment, he said nothing. Around them, the men who had laughed earlier shifted uncomfortably. One cleared his throat, another suddenly found something very interesting on the floor. The commander straightened, his expression unreadable. He looked at her face now, really looked, as if aligning what he saw with something already etched into his memory. "You're early," he said at last. "Yes, sir," she replied. That was all. 2 simple sentences. But the air in the room had changed. The laughter from outside felt like it belonged to another lifetime. The skepticism began to crack, replaced by confusion. The commander's eyes returned once more to the tattoo, then back to her. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, not with anger, but with something closer to respect. "Stand by," he said. She nodded and rose smoothly to her feet, duffel in hand. As she did, the room watched her differently now. The jokes no longer felt safe. The certainty they had carried minutes earlier was gone, replaced by an uneasy awareness that they might have made a very big mistake. And this was only the beginning. The corridor outside the operations room felt longer than it actually was. Fluorescent lights hummed softly overhead as she followed the SEAL commander, her boots landing silently on the polished floor. No one spoke, the kind of silence that wasn't empty, but heavy with unasked questions. A few operators they passed paused mid-step, eyes tracking the unlikely pair. The commander didn't slow down. He didn't need to. People moved out of his way instinctively. She noticed the change immediately. The looks were different now. Less curiosity, more caution. Whispers stopped when the commander was near. The laughter from earlier felt distant, almost unreal, like something remembered from a bad dream. They entered a smaller briefing room. The door closed behind them with a soft click. Inside, the space was sparse. A table, a screen on the wall, a faint smell of marker ink and old coffee. The commander gestured toward a chair, then took one himself across from her. For a moment, he studied her without speaking. "You haven't changed much," he said finally. A flicker of something crossed her face. Not a smile, not quite nostalgia. "You have, sir," she replied. "More gray." He exhaled through his nose, a sound that might have been a laugh years ago. "Comes with the job." Silence returned, but this time it was familiar, almost comfortable. He leaned back slightly, folding his hands. "You know why you're here." "Yes, sir." "You also know why people don't believe it." "Yes, sir." His eyes sharpened. "Does it bother you?" She considered the question carefully. "It used to," she said. "A long time ago." He nodded, as if that answer told him everything he needed to know. "Your record crossed my desk last night," he said. "Not the public one. The real one." Her jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. And I wondered how long it would take before someone laughed at you again." She met his gaze. 5 minutes. A corner of his mouth twitched. "Faster than I expected." On the other side of the wall, the main operations room buzzed quietly. Screens glowed. Radios murmured. Outside this room, men were preparing for a mission they didn't yet know was about to change shape. "You disappeared," the commander said. "No calls, no updates, just gone." "I was told to," she replied. "Yes, I remember." He paused. "A lot of people didn't." Her fingers rested loosely on the table, steady. "That was the point." The commander leaned forward now. "They're short on time," he said. "And they're short on options." She didn't ask for details. She didn't need to. The tone of his voice told her everything. This wasn't training. This wasn't politics. This was the kind of situation where plans collapsed and experience mattered more than rank. Outside, the door opened briefly as an officer stepped in. "Sir, we're assembled." The commander nodded once. "Give us a minute." The officer's eyes flicked to her arm, to the tattoo, then back to the commander. Whatever question had been forming died before it reached his lips. He left, closing the door gently behind him. The commander stood. She followed his lead without hesitation. When they re-entered the operations room, the energy shifted again. Everyone was standing now, clustered around the central table. Maps glowed on screens. Satellite images flickered. Conversations died the moment the commander raised his hand. "Listen up," he said. Every eye locked onto him. "We have a developing situation," he continued. "And we're adjusting the plan." A few operators exchanged glances. Adjusting the plan this late meant something had gone wrong. He gestured toward her. "This is Lieutenant Reyes." The name rippled through the room like a shockwave. Some faces went blank. Others went pale. One man's mouth actually fell open before he caught himself. The laughter from earlier replayed in her mind, quieter now, like an echo fading into nothing. "She'll be advising on insertion and recovery," the commander said. "Her word on this carries the same weight as mine." Silence. Not disbelief this time. Something heavier. Realization. One of the men who had laughed outside earlier stood rigid near the back. His eyes were fixed on the floor now. Another swallowed hard, staring at the tattoo he had mocked without understanding. An operator near the table cleared his throat. "Sir, with respect, I thought Lieutenant Reyes was dead." The commander finished calmly. The word landed like a dropped weapon. "Yes, sir," the man admitted. "So did our enemies," the commander said. "That misunderstanding saved lives." He turned slightly toward her. "Tell them." She stepped forward. Every eye shifted to her. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Calm. Precise. "The extraction window you're planning for will close 8 minutes earlier than you think," she said. "The wind pattern changes here." She tapped the screen. "That canyon becomes a funnel. You go in late, you don't come out clean." Someone frowned. "Intel didn't show that. Intel didn't walk it," she replied. "No arrogance. No challenge. Just fact." She continued, pointing out details others had missed. Terrain features that didn't show up clearly on maps. Human patterns that didn't appear in reports. Each sentence stripped away another layer of doubt. The room leaned in. By the time she finished, no one was smiling. No one was laughing. Pens moved quickly. Heads nodded. The commander watched quietly, arms crossed, a faint look of grim satisfaction on his face. When she stepped back, silence followed again. But it was different now. Respectful. Heavy with understanding. One of the junior operators finally spoke. "Ma'am," he said, voice tight. "About earlier." She met his eyes, held them for a moment. "Focus on the mission," she said. "That's apology enough." The commander nodded once, approving. "Gear up," he ordered the room. "We move in 20. Chairs scraped back. The room exploded into motion. But as people moved past her now, their eyes no longer lingered on the tattoo. They looked at her face instead. And for the first time since she'd walked onto the base that morning, no one underestimated her. They feared disappointing her. Outside, as she checked her equipment, the man who had first joked about Halloween stopped in front of her. He stood awkwardly, helmet under his arm. "Ma'am," he said quietly. "I was out of line." She studied him for a second, then nodded. "Learn from it." "Yes, ma'am." He walked away lighter than before. She looked down at the tattoo once more. Same ink, same skin, but the weight it carried had shifted again, as it always did when truth finally surfaced. And soon, much more than respect would be on the line. The rotors thundered against the night sky, chopping the darkness into fragments as the aircraft hovered just long enough for them to move. The world below was a patchwork of shadow and muted light, unforgiving and quiet in the way only hostile ground could be. She felt the familiar pull in her chest, not fear, but focus. This was where everything stripped down to truth. No jokes, no doubts, just skill, timing, and trust. She moved first. Boots hit the ground, knees bent, body absorbing impact like muscle memory itself had taken control. The team followed, spreading out with disciplined speed. No wasted motion, no hesitation. Radios whispered short confirmations. The plan she had adjusted earlier unfolded exactly as she said it would. Wind curled through the canyon walls, tugging at gear, pushing dust into the air. 8 minutes early, and already the margin was razor thin. From her position, she scanned the terrain, every sense alive. The tattoo on her arm was hidden now beneath fabric and armor, but it didn't matter. It was never about being seen. It was about belonging to this moment, to this responsibility. The first complication came fast. A distant movement where there shouldn't have been one. A shadow that lingered a second too long. She raised her fist. The team froze instantly. No questions. No second guessing. She adjusted the approach with 2 quick hand signals, redirecting the element just enough to avoid a trap that would have cost lives. Later, someone would say it was luck. She knew better. They reached the objective under a sky that felt lower than before. Tension coiled tight as a wire. Breathing slowed. Time stretched. She took point again, eyes cutting through the darkness. When the moment came, it came clean. Controlled. Efficient. No chaos. No heroics. Just professionals doing what they were trained to do. When it was over, when the final signal was given and extraction was called, she allowed herself exactly one deep breath. Back on the aircraft, the noise swallowed everything. The team sat strapped in, faces marked with sweat and dust, eyes sharp but calmer now. Someone let out a low breath that sounded like relief. Another leaned back, helmet resting against the frame. Across from her, the same man who had laughed that morning caught her eye. This time, there was no awkwardness. No guilt. Just respect. He gave a small nod. She returned it. The base lights appeared on the horizon, distant at first, then closer. When the aircraft finally touched down, the ramp lowered and the night air rushed in. As they disembarked, word had already spread. It always did. Quietly. Quickly. Truth traveled fast in places like this. The SEAL commander was waiting. He stood off to the side, hands clasped behind his back, watching as the team filed past. When she approached, he stepped forward. No crowd gathered. No speech was made. He looked at her arm as she removed her gloves, the sleeve riding up just enough for the tattoo to show again under the harsh white lights. Without hesitation, without ceremony, he raised his hand and rendered a sharp, unmistakable salute. The world seemed to stop. Every conversation around them died instantly. Boots halted mid-step, heads turned. Men who had faced gunfire without flinching stood frozen, staring at a moment they didn't expect to witness. She returned the salute just as crisply. For a second, nothing else existed. No rank, no doubt, just acknowledgement. The commander lowered his hand. "Good work," he said. "Thank you, sir." That was all, but it was enough. Later, as the base slowly returned to its rhythm, as gear was stowed and reports were written, she walked alone toward the barracks. The laughter from the morning felt like it belonged to someone else's life. The tattoo was the same. The woman wearing it was the same. But the way the world saw her had shifted, corrected by truth and proven under pressure. She paused briefly, looking down at her forearm. Ink and skin, history and sacrifice. Never a joke. Never was. If you made it to the end of this story, if moments like this matter to you, stories of honor, sacrifice, and silent strength, then don't forget to subscribe to the channel. This is Bravo Warrior Stories, where respect is earned, truth is revealed, and legends are born in the quiet moments no one expects.